to achieve. With a sudden surge of strength, one of the patients plunged his hand into the machine's structure and, in a single movement, broke the thick metal bar, shattering everything around. That feat belonged to a young man named Musashi, who in the muscle strength test had achieved the highest score ever recorded. Soon after, other talents stood out. Chizuru placed first in the blood test, Maruko achieved the first position in the bone test, and Reina, visibly dejected, led in the body fat test. Two other patients observed impressed, commenting on how Musashi's generation was incredibly skilled. However, for Nito, the situation was different. In the blood test, one of the doctors ordered him to harden his blood, but he only thought about how he would do that since it clearly made no sense to him. With his face contorted in panic, Nito desperately tried to comply with the command, while sharp needles drew closer and closer to his body. However, it was no use. Seconds later, his body was pierced, gushing blood everywhere. Immediately after, in the bone test, while the doctor asked him to soften his bones, Nito screamed in pain, feeling his shoulder dislocate. In the muscle test, his arm instantly broke. Fallen to the ground, exhausted and bleeding, Nito lamented that his bone had broken and that he hadn't lasted even a second, even with the 500 push-ups he did daily. Meanwhile, the nurse explained to a doctor that she still knew nothing about our protagonist, as she had started working recently. Soon, the woman clarified that since he still hadn't shown compatibility with any of the specific tests, she made him go through all of them, which left the nurse speechless upon seeing the boy's suffering. Later, already night, while the other patients slept in their beds, Nito continued writhing in pain. He complained of so much pain that he couldn't sleep. With that, our hero picked up a pill case, remembering the professor's warning. Painkillers were rare and would only come in the next test, so he needed to use them with caution. Suddenly, one of the patients in a nearby bed groaned, attracting Nito's attention. The poor guy was wasting away in his bed. He wouldn't last much longer, as he was so weak he wouldn't even be able to participate in the next tests. The man then begged Nito for a painkiller, confessing that the pain was so much he hadn't slept for 3 days, and even promised to reward him twofold in the next test. Nearby, two patients mocked the situation. One affirmed that he would die anyway, while the other was already discussing who would get his belongings after that happened. However, ignoring the cruel comments, Nito approached the poor guy and offered his medicine. He said he wouldn't need his painkillers. Surprised by the gesture, the man slowly turned his face as Nito placed the case beside him. While sweating non-stop, the man's eyes widened in gratitude. Nito then hurried him, telling him to take the medicine quickly before he changed his mind. While the poor guy devoured the pills, the two idiotic patients commented among themselves that Nito was doing something stupid again. Soon after, they decided it was better to go to sleep, leaving Nito alone with the patient. After taking the medicine, the man still seemed weak and stated that it wasn't enough. Soon he vented to Nito, saying that the doctor only told him to do push-ups, but doubted that would be enough to improve his test results, and questioned Nito if he had heard what the other patients said about him, asking if he liked being deceived. Our hero, scratching his head, replied that he had thought he would receive double payment and that he saw no an idiot. He found it easier to simply believe. For this reason, he still hadn't decided if what the patient or the doctor said was a lie. The man insinuated that perhaps Nito was just an idiot, and he, already irritated by so much provocation, told him to shut up at once. However, the patient remembered that, as a child, Nito used to read about the world outside and shared everything with them, so he asked if, even after everything, he still hadn't changed at all. Already lying down again, the patient said he would finally be able to rest and asked Nito to tell him once more about the world beyond. Our hero promptly agreed, and so he began to describe the wonders of the outside, talking about something called bread, which would be fluffy and delicious, and about cats, which would also be very cute. The next morning, the nurse confirmed that the patient had passed away. Our protagonist, overcome with sadness, merely murmured that he had lost another friend. As the nurse carried the body away on a stretcher, he turned to the other side. At that moment, Musashi approached and called him, asking him to come outside for a moment, and in a field, Nito joined Musashi, Chizuru, Maruko, and Reina. Gathered there, Musashi announced that they were going to escape from that hospital, which made our hero ask what Musashi meant by that. He argued that they didn't need to do such a thing, since everyone there always excelled in the tests and therefore would soon be discharged. It was then that Musashi interrupted him with a curious question, wanting to know if he knew what the world record for the 100-meter dash was. Nito, once again, understood nothing, and Musashi revealed a Guinness World Records book from 2020, stating that he had borrowed it from one of the staff members. He pointed to the book and informed that the record was 9 seconds and 58 hundredths, and that more than half of the people in that hospital were capable of surpassing that mark. Musashi then showed an image of a runner and the record time, questioning how they could be considered weaker than people from outside. They could surpass world records. Nito, overcome with naivety, said that was great. After all, they could become famous athletes when they finally left that place. Musashi, however, interrupted Nito, asking him to look at something. Then he lifted his own shirt, revealing a grotesque and pulsating tumor in his belly, which seemed to have a life of its own. He explained that in recent months, that tumor in his stomach had grown considerably, and that along with it, their strength had also increased. Chizuru, releasing sharp blades through her blood, and Maruko, displaying an abnormally elongated arm, agreed that they were becoming something they were not themselves. Reina, with her hands covered in flames, stared at Nito and said that something inside them was changing, that they were no longer the same as before. With a bang, Musashi's fist went through a stone wall, and with his arm transformed into a shapeless and monstrous muscle mass, he warned that if they remained there, they would eventually turn into monsters. Suddenly, the nurse appeared, commenting that she had finally found them. Smiling, she gently reprimanded them not to destroy the wall and informed them that the doctor was waiting for them. But before following the nurse, Musashi invited Nito to accompany them and said that he should only go if he truly wished to know the outside world. The nurse, approaching our protagonist with a sinister smile, asked what they were talking about, but he calmly replied that it was nothing much. Later, inside the hospital, the group awaited their next instructions. The doctor, accompanied by two nurses, announced with applause that all of them had passed the test and that, for this reason, they would be discharged. With that, Musashi, Chizuru, Maruko, and Reina looked astonished, not believing what they heard. The doctor then confirmed that they would depart that same night. Faced with that, other patients murmured that finally someone was being released, and as they already imagined, it was Musashi's group who had succeeded. However, that left Musashi and his colleagues silent, crestfallen. It was then that our heroes shouted, drawing their attention, and with a smile on his face and his thumb raised, he congratulated them, saying that they had succeeded and could now finally go after everything they had always dreamed of living. However, seeing that he would have to leave his great friend behind, this only made the boy even sadder. However, Nito encouraged his friend, telling him to just go because surely he would also be released soon. And so the group moved away, following the nurse through the corridors while our protagonist watched them leave, his eyes teary with sadness. Soon after, he approached the doctor and said that he had done the 500 daily push-ups, as she had instructed him, but that, unfortunately, his test results had not improved. And for that reason, he questioned what he should do. And coldly, the doctor merely said that then he would have to do 5,000 a day, which left the poor guy completely shocked by that absurd order. Shortly after, even with all that, he continued determined, counting push-up by push-up until he passed 1,000. Meanwhile, Nito motivated himself by imagining something incredible that existed in the world outside, a place called Disneyland. And as time passed, more and more patients lost their lives. But Nito didn't stop, continuing his exhaustive count, which now already exceeded 3,500 push-ups. And around him, several other patients saw that determination as something impossible to replicate. And not to lose the habit, more patients died as the days passed. Even exhausted, Nito persisted, approaching 5,000 push-ups. As he forced each push-up, his mind wandered, full of doubts about the world outside, trying to understand simple things like where children came from. And after a while, that cursed hospital was filled with corpses. Finally, with his body at its limit, Nito reached the mark of 5,000 push-ups. Exhausted, he tumbled from the bed, falling face down on the cold dormitory floor. Even so, he dragged himself back to bed, clutching the sheet tightly. Meanwhile, the poor guy believed that this time, perhaps he could get out of there, feeling that he would finally have a chance. But upon noticing the enormous dormitory full of empty beds and others with lifeless bodies, he realized something cruel. Perhaps no one there had truly left alive. All who passed away were simply taken away. That night, under the moonlight, Nito spotted the new nurse passing in front of his dormitory corridor. She seemed thoughtful, holding a book against her chest. Suddenly, our hero's eyes widened, for he recognized the book. He remembered it was the Guinness book that Musashi had shown him, and also recalled that his friend had said he had borrowed it from one of the staff members. Watching the nurse walk away, an idea began to form in his mind. He discreetly followed her to a heavy metal door. The nurse entered, and the door closed, leaving Nito outside. It was then that he noticed a door next to it with a sign indicating it was the staff cleaning room, and soon realized that the lock was broken. Carefully, he opened the door and found himself facing a long, dark staircase. And as he descended a bit, he had the sensation that that place was a secret basement, and wondered where the new nurse could be. Continuing to explore the secret location, he heard voices and wondered if there was anyone else around. Peeking through a crack, he saw the doctor and the nurse talking, and heard the doctor ask about the egg, while the other said that patient A210 wasn't reacting, and it might be time to discard him. Nito became confused, not understanding what all that conversation meant. Then, he heard the doctor say that group A634 could have lived much longer if they hadn't thought about escaping. That put him on alert, wondering if they were talking about Musashi and the others. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his shoulder. It was the doctor who questioned him about why he was there. Terrified, Nito could only stammer. Suddenly, she squeezed his shoulder even harder, stating that no matter how long it took, his results would never improve, and called him defective trash. Then, the doctor's hand transformed into a monstrous claw full of veins, which crushed his shoulder. Blood gushed as he roared in agony. Quickly, holding his bleeding shoulder, he tried to keep his distance from her. Meanwhile, the crazy woman looked at her own hand, now back to normal, and wondered, coldly, if she had squeezed too hard. Soon, observing the remnants of our protagonist's flesh, the doctor commented that humans were quite fragile. Nito, with his shoulder raw, realized, horrified, that the doctor was even stronger than Musashi. He understood that the doctor was acting strangely and that, without a doubt, she had tried to kill him. At that instant, he finally understood that there was something very wrong with that hospital, exactly as Musashi had said. Worried, he wondered if his colleagues were all right. Then, he ran towards the metal door that the nurse had passed through before, and upon opening it, Nito found himself facing a dark and long corridor, filled with human figures trapped in strange cocoons, enveloped by a membrane that pulsed frighteningly. His face contorted in shock and disbelief at that sight. Then, he passed by those figures, each one possessing an identification seal, which made him wonder what dreadful place that was. Paralyzed, he observed them, immobile, trapped in their own flesh, and looking closer at one of them, he noticed that there was something moving inside. Suddenly, a gigantic cocoon appeared at the end of the corridor. Nito looked up, terrified, and suddenly he realized that it was a shapeless and pulsating mass, with several human bodies fused to it. And, well, one of the bodies trapped in that grotesque aberration was one of his friends, Musashi. However, looking around, he realized that not only Musashi was trapped there, but everyone who had supposedly left that hospital. Yes, all his friends were trapped in that grotesque mass. With that, horror took over his face. But when he turned, still trying to process what he saw, the doctor stealthily appeared behind him, piercing his belly with her powerful claws. At the same time, she called them bad, just seeds trying to escape on their own. Nito, sweating cold, asked what she meant by that. The doctor then grabbed his arm tightly and stated that all of them, the patients, were merely seeds. She explained that her species couldn't reproduce on its own, and for that reason, they planted an egg inside a person and used them as nutrients. Soon, she stated that in ancient times, our protagonist's species used to attract humans during the night to implant their eggs, but she considered that too much work. For this reason, with a macabre smile, she revealed that they had decided to use that creation method, and as her body transformed, further destroying our poor Nito's body, she revealed that people used to call them succubi. But well, despite discovering the truth, seconds later, our hero was already completely torn apart. As he lost consciousness, Nito still thought about the dream of escaping from there, and the succubus, noticing that he no longer had strength, merely walked away, certain that he wouldn't last long. Fallen and covered in blood, he remembered the silliest dreams he had, like petting a kitten, and little by little, memories with Musashi and the others came to the surface. Suddenly, Musashi's voice from within that shapeless mass begged him to run away and expressed his own desire to one day eat something called bread. He recalled how bad his test results were and how, for that reason, he believed he needed to try harder than anyone. Even on the verge of death, he remembered his exhaustive routine of push-ups, all in the hope of one day being discharged from that hospital. Crawling towards the monstrosity in front of him, he could only lament not having had time to share with them the dreams they would never live. Even weak, the poor guy asked them to hold on a little longer because he would kill whatever it took to save everyone from there. The doctor, realizing he hadn't died yet, screamed for him to move away from the egg. Then, Nito began to be sucked into the mass of flesh, leaving only his lower part behind. Next, already inside the meat mass, our hero found himself facing some absurdly strange embryos connected to the wall of that place, which made him wonder what the hell that was. At the same instant, our protagonist began to drown in the viscous liquid that enveloped the place. And then, his mind was teleported to be with his friends, Musashi, Chizuru, Maruko, and Reina. Soon he called out to them, still not believing they were there. Musashi then questioned him, wanting to know why he hadn't run away as he had said. And Nito, awkwardly, said he couldn't run away, leaving his friend behind. And, with a glimmer of hope, asked if this time they would really go to the outside world together. Chizuru, touching Musashi's shoulder, said that was typical of him. Then, Maruko commented that he was easy to deceive, slow to understand things, and always came last in the tests. Next, Reina asked if he had become a seed without a fight. Back to the dreadful reality inside the mass of flesh, Nito saw himself connected to one of the strange embryos by a tentacle. His bizarre form slowly contorted. Again in his mind, Musashi asked Nito if he knew why they had invited him to escape with them. Our hero, confused, didn't know what to answer. It was then that Musashi revealed that the reason was because he had given them a dream. Reina remembered how Nito always talked about the world outside, describing cats as cute creatures. And Maruko remembered with a smile a certain mac, where they served meat in the middle of bread, and that just by imagining it, everyone thought it was the best invention in the world. Chizuru, in turn, remembered that Nito always said that love was sweet like honey, and that was why she had managed to do her best in the tests. With teary eyes, Nito was deeply touched by his friend's words. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Back to the terrifying reality, innumerable hands, coming from from that shapeless mass of flesh touched him, calling him by name. The collective voice of his friends, now fused with that aberration, affirmed that his dream was also their dream. And so, Nito's body began to be reconstituted. The doctor, seeing that the egg was about to hatch, prepared a powerful attack and advanced furiously, screaming for the defective trash to move away from the egg. But suddenly a hand emerged from that shapeless mass, and in a blink of an eye, an explosion of energy emanated from the mass of flesh, violently throwing the doctor away. Stunned, she wondered what had just happened. But then she realized, shocked, that a hand had come out of the egg and thrown her through the air with unimaginable force. The idiot could hardly believe what she was seeing. Her body trembled as she looked at the hole that now existed in her torso. She didn't understand why the egg, the child she carried, had turned against her with such force, and as strange as it was, her own creation now made her bleed. Suddenly, she saw Nito's silhouette enveloped in an aura of pure energy. She murmured that it couldn't be happening, that something like that shouldn't even be possible. For before her, Nito emerged, no longer as a fragile seed, but as a transformed being, with half his face and his right arm covered by a mass of pulsating tendons, emanating a terrifying power. The doctor, gaping, understood that the seedbed, which was supposed to create succubi, was now being used to create a human. Enraged, she fortified herself again and advanced against him. However, Nito was no longer a simple seedbed, and quickly, he raised his enormous arm against her. The doctor, in an instant, realized that he was exactly like her. Unlike her, Nito was not just similar, he was even stronger, carrying with him the power of 5,000 push-ups. The power of all his friends and all his dreams was now with him. Then, his fist, now in a grotesque form, brutally collided with the doctor's face, who was now once and for all disintegrated by the overwhelming force of the blow. With the doctor finally defeated, Nito still stood, and even with his weak body, he felt his shapeless arm still pulsating. At that instant, he remembered the dream he had always cherished, a simple dream of a normal and happy life alongside his friends from that hospital, far from all that pain and suffering. As our hero, exhausted, fell to the ground, the new nurse arrived, attracted by the sound of the explosion, and wondered what had happened there in the egg room. Looking at the remains of the succubus embryos and at Nito, the sole survivor, she could hardly believe what she saw. Holding the world record book that Musashi liked so much, she approached. With teary eyes, Nito received a happy birthday from the nurse, and in the background, an immense tower rose among the buildings, marking the beginning of his journey in that new world of succubi. Sometime later, in a place far from there, the new nurse's phone rang as she was getting out of the shower. Answering the call, Hiro was asked about her secret operation, and if she had found any succubus in the hospital. Soon, she confirmed that the hospital was, in fact, a facility for the creation of demons, and that she had tried to infiltrate deeper, but had been interrupted. Questioned if she hadn't managed to rescue anyone, she replied that no one knew for sure what he was, human or succubus, and that for that reason, she had brought him with her. And there was Nito, with an impressive physique. Confused, our hero looked around, not understanding where he was, only remembering that before fainting, he was in the hospital. Then, he noticed the strange crystallized stakes that held him and wondered what they were. Meanwhile, on the phone, Hiro explained that she had contained him with her own power, and the person on the other end of the line asked if he was with her now. Confidently, she stated with conviction that a common succubus wouldn't be able to move even an inch. Suddenly, a bang echoed through the house, and the wall where our protagonist was trapped was completely destroyed. At the same instant, Hiro looked at the damage, and hearing that, her boss asked her what had happened. Outside, Nito's feet stepped into a puddle of water. Still confused, he continued trying to leave that place as quickly as possible. Looking at his arm, now covered in bulging veins and with a monstrous appearance, he wondered what had happened to his body. Walking down the street in the rain, he questioned where he was until a black cat appeared, meowing in his direction. The feline stared at him intently, and well, the poor guy had never seen such a creature, except for stories told inside the hospital. Meanwhile, people in raincoats passed by on the street. Further on, two homeless people observed the movement in the rain, and Nato, stopping for a moment beside them, finally murmured, realizing where he was. Standing at a crosswalk, he observed the flow of people, finally confronting the outside world he so dreamed of knowing. Remembering his friends Musashi, Chizuru, Maruko, and Reina, Nito finally understood that, despite everything, he had succeeded. Suddenly, the cat began to move away, and our hero, wanting to pet the animal, asked it to wait. At the same instant, a person warned him, saying that the light was still red. Nito, not understanding anything, questioned what she meant by that, and the next moment, a huge truck hit him head-on. The drivers, shocked, shouted in disbelief that they had run him over, complaining that he ran out in front of them. At the same time, the black cat meowed over Nito's body. Then, our hero, despite everything, remained conscious, murmuring that it had hurt a lot. His body, after the impact, was in a completely unnatural position, with his limbs grotesquely twisted. People soon gathered around, and while one commented that he had been hit by a a 2-ton truck, Nito, still dizzy, asked where the cat was and why so many people were surrounding him. It was then that, to everyone's horror, half of Nito's face transformed, revealing his succubus nature, and people, terrified, began to scream that he was a demon. Soon people with donation boxes appeared. While some shouted for public safety, others said they had been attacked. Sensing the danger, Nito fled as fast as he could while people shouted that he was escaping. Alone and desolate, he sat on the bank of a river, under a bridge, questioning why everyone acted that way, looking at him as if he were a monster. And only then did he realize that his injuries had healed. With his head down, he finally accepted the harsh truth. He was a succubus. Discouraged, the poor guy wondered how he could have a normal life that way. Suddenly a voice called him, and startled, Nito turned around. A man in a suit holding an umbrella approached, apologizing for scaring him, and explained that he was just worried about his torn clothes. The next instant, the kind man handed a brand new shirt to our protagonist, and with a smile, Nito exclaimed in wonder that it seemed like nothing had happened. The man then revealed that he used to dream of being a stylist, but now he was just a salaried worker. He said he couldn't leave him alone with his clothes in that state, and saying goodbye, stated that he needed to go. Nito then called him, making the man stop and turn around. With his gaze down, he began to vent, saying he had had a dream for a long time. A dream he believed, with the help of his friends, would finally come true that day. Soon, memories of the accident and people's reactions invaded his mind, which made him sadly realize that reality was quite different from what he imagined. He admitted that it was really difficult to realize his dream in that outside world. The man kindly advised him that when he felt he could no longer pursue his own dreams, he should help someone else achieve theirs. And, well, those words touched our hero. The man then said that for him, that meant considering someone part of his family. He remembered his children fondly and explained that, even hating his job, he thought about the dreams they would still have, and that was what gave him strength to move forward every day. Soon, he said that it wasn't always about achieving goals and that it didn't have to be his own dream to be realized. At that moment, our hero remembered his friend's words, how his dream was also their dream. With his hand on his chest, he finally understood what Musashi and the others meant. Then, our hero told the man that he wanted to live his life like him, which made him happy. Suddenly, Nito's stomach rumbled, and he, embarrassed, commented that it happened when he was relieved. The man at the same instant let out a sigh, and invited the boy to dinner at his house. Nito, surprised and happy, merely questioned if he was serious, but the man affirmed that he wouldn't let a boy who admired him so much go hungry. Arriving at the man's house, he invited him in. Our hero, enchanted, said he had never eaten at someone's house and wondered internally if that was the dinner at the neighbors they had told him about when he was still in the hospital. However, the man just laughed and told him to come in and eat. Upon entering the house, Nito encountered a grotesque and swollen female figure with a bow on her head. His face, previously happy, contorted in pure horror. The creature, with shapeless features and an empty gaze, remained motionless in the corner of the room. Nito, confused, looked at the man, seeking an explanation. Soon the guy looked at our protagonist, noticing that he was uncomfortable with something. Seconds later, the two stared at each other in an awkward silence. Suddenly, the man panicked, asking if Nito was a succubus, and quickly begged forgiveness for bringing a human home. With eyes wide with terror, he remembered that Nito had been hit by a truck, and stated that if he were human, he would already be dead. Nito, with cold sweat running down his face, understood that the man had seen him transform during the accident. The crazy man, completely losing his composure, grabbed his own head, screaming that he no longer cared. Suddenly, he began to tear out his own eye. Nito's eyes widened in alarm. At the same instant, the man's leg began to undergo a grotesque mutation. And then, with his body completely transformed into a horrifying succubus, he snarled that in moments like that, all that was needed was to kill. But before he could attack, a sneaker was violently shoved into his mouth. And well, someone had entered the house, leaving the window completely shattered. It was Hiro, who appeared with a powerful kick, hitting the succubus full on. Nito, fallen on the ground, looked at her, surprised. He recognized her as the new nurse from the hospital. Then, she quickly turned against him and reprimanded him, asking how he dared to escape without a word and even leave a huge hole in her room. Furthermore, she complained that he had stolen her favorite shirt and now it was all torn. And, well, Nito awkwardly just apologized. Hiro then looked at the grotesque creature in the corner of the room, and to make matters worse, she mentioned that the succubus he had found was known as Dresser. And in a blink of an eye, he, who seemed to be defeated, quickly disappeared with a front flip. And as he prepared a powerful kick, Hiro explained that he was the most violent succubus in that area. At the same instant, he slammed her face with full force. The blow violently threw Hiro against the wall, which shattered on impact. The succubus, with a terrifying smile, merely murmured that that was payback. He then revealed to Nito that she was a public safety agent. At the same instant, Dresser screamed, recognizing our young man as the one who had escaped from the hospital. He sighed, finding his own bad luck amusing, and said that for a moment he actually believed he would be his superior someday. Then Then, memories of the hospital returned to Dresser's mind when he and his friends, connected to tubes, dreamed of the day they would finally eat something real. Back in the present, a neighboring family was having dinner, and as the smell of food spread, the man asked if his wife had heard something next door. Suddenly, the tranquility of that meal was brutally interrupted with Hiro, who crashed through the wall. At the same instant, the family screamed at the sight and urgently called for an ambulance. With his monstrous legs, he looked at Nito and lamented that he only wanted to eat a normal meal with his nephew, but stated that because of the mess, he would have to move again. Nito, terrified, looked at the door. With a forced smile, he said that suddenly he wasn't hungry anymore and asked if he could leave. But Dresser, furious, screamed for him not to escape. At that moment, Hiro, even wounded, stood up amidst the debris of the wall and, furious, screamed that he was going to die. The family, terrified, screamed upon realizing that it was a succubus attack. Dresser, surprised, questioned how she was still alive after receiving his kick. Meanwhile, Nito just said he'd rather die than stay in that place. Hiro then explained that outside, on the asphalt, Dresser would be able to use 100% of his leg strength and kill him in seconds. Nito, confused, asked what she meant by asphalt. She then asked him to look at the ground, showing the holes and explaining that the floor was so fragile it couldn't support his strength. And so, she revealed that the apartment floor was, in fact, diminishing Dresser's leg strength. The succubus then understood that she had waited for him to enter the house. Realizing that she was familiar with fighting, at that instant, Dresser's foot grated on the wooden floorboard. For him, at that moment, it was as if he were fighting on tissue paper. Then, Hiro gave a slight smile upon realizing that she had already lost enough blood, and stated that the advantage was hers, while sharp crystals began to form on her arm. Soon after, she wielded crystal roses made from her own blood and announced her technique, the Blood Order Blooming Firefly. Dresser, shocked by the girl's power, could only stammer as she advanced towards him. His foot sank into the fragile wooden floor, which shattered under his force. With his face shattered by the woman's swift blow, he roared, realizing that she was also a succubus. Hiro, in turn, admitted that her punches didn't have much weight, as she wasn't a muscle-type succubus like him. However, with determination, she declared that for that very reason, she would outnumber him, striking him with impressive speed immediately after. Nito, upon seeing that insane battle, thought he needed to escape quickly, or he would end up dead. And it was at that instant that he realized, shocked, that Hiro was also a succubus. At that instant, our hero looked at the shapeless creature in the corner of the room, and with that, he soon remembered the moment Musashi told him to run away when he was still in the hospital, which left him even more confused about what he should do next. Hiro then activated her technique, Blooming Firefly, materializing a crystal rose with her blood. Soon she advanced, explaining that the fragments of that rose grazed and shattered against the enemy. When it broke apart, it looked like a butterfly flying away, and that's why it received that name. And so, the beautiful blood butterflies filled the environment. While each blow shattered Dresser's body, the blood butterflies fluttered around the succubus, who was shocked by the force of the attack. However, the crazy man stamped his foot hard on the ground and delivered an absurdly powerful kick to Hiro's stomach. It had been a full-force kick. Dresser understood that in that fragile apartment, there was no safe place where he could firm himself. Hiro spat blood non-stop after the impact of the blow, and from 1 second to the next, she found herself on the floor. And well, the long-legged man had found a slightly stronger ground in the bathtub downstairs. Well, but before we continue the fight, let's go back 15 years into Dresser's past, whose human name was Shoichi Takahashi. He found himself at a crossroads in his life, observing the city beside the same bridge where he first saw our protagonist. Nervous, he anxiously thought that in just 5 minutes, he would have the interview for his dream job as a stylist. Looking into the distance, he saw his destination across the river and realized in despair that at that rate, he would never arrive on time. His briefcase fell to the ground as he lamented being late for not getting time off from his current job, a job that, although he prioritized for family and stability, forced him to consider giving up his dream. But Dresser refused to give up, and with impressive speed, he began to run across the water towards his goal. Well, water was a treacherous fluid. Jumping from a height of 40 meters would be instant death. Even a bullet, which easily pierced a wooden board, did not advance more than a few centimeters on the surface of the water before shattering. However, with speed, water could become as hard as asphalt. And so, with his speed, Dresser stepped on the water in the bathtub, something that Hiro, unfortunately, had not calculated. At the same instant, the girl found her face buried in the wooden floor of the house. Well, that ability was a reflection of Dresser's obsession with his dream. While crushing Hiro with his foot, he remembered that in the past he had run on water, and that without that, he would never have arrived in time for the stylist interview. However, he had failed. Enraged, he screamed that if he didn't have to work on such short notice, maybe he would have succeeded, but stated that there was always an obstacle in his way. Always that, always that. At the same instant, the monster roared that he would not give up on his dream. And so, after crushing Hiro against the floor, he stood up and, looking at Nito, Nito, he snarled that he would be next. However, facing the monster, he questioned him if he was risking his own life to achieve his dreams. He then remembered his friends from the hospital and how they were also doing the same. Soon, our hero lamented not having petted a cat yet, nor having had a normal meal at home. Determined, he affirmed to himself that he needed to realize those dreams. And with his transformed arm, he declared that he had made up his mind and that he too would fight for his life. Dresser, hearing that, stated that a cat, a homemade meal, were indeed pleasant dreams. Then, in a flashback, a man was brutally killed by young Takahashi, or rather, Dresser. One of his colleagues could hardly believe they had been followed by the police, thanking him for his help afterwards. Then, the madman, holding a formal suit with his fingertips, began to vent that he received a fixed monthly salary for killing a certain number of people, and that he was not a salaried worker, but a manual laborer. Soon after, he spoke with a superior who asked if he still lived alone, and Dresser explained that he preferred not to start a family until he achieved his dream of being a stylist, saying he had matters to resolve and needed to go home. Then, the superior offered him a woman, a seedbed, and ordered him to generate a descendant because strong succubi had the duty to preserve their genes. Looking at the woman, Dresser returned to the present and stated that that was a dream that had stayed in the past. After all, his woman had turned into that shapeless thing. But soon, our hero interrupted him and said he would go look for dinner and a cat, so he affirmed that it was better to finish that as quickly as possible. Dresser commented that Nito's eyes reminded him of his own in the past, when he pursued a dream without looking back, and Nito, not knowing what to say, just listened, wondering if he hadn't used his family as an excuse to pursue his crazy dream. Then, with his foot sunk into the fragile floor, the madman thought about how he could increase the power of his kick in that unstable environment. Suddenly, his muscles contracted and his leg began to transform. Before Nito's eyes, Dresser's silhouette became even more shapeless. His muscles intertwined with absurd speed, leaving Nito shocked, who wondered if that was also a succubus. Meanwhile, Dresser thought that after that fight, he would finally go back to making clothes because our hero had reignited his passion. And there, right in front of Nito, he showed his Muscle Link battlesuit, proudly saying that that would be his true masterpiece. With a sinister look through the muscle fibers that now covered his face, he thanked Nito for reminding him of his dream. He then said that, as a thank you, he would finish him off in a single blow and lamented that it was a pity the boy wouldn't see the finest clothes he would make. Nito, seized by fear, never imagined it would be so terrifying and questioned if he couldn't just leave. But Dresser, with his muscle armor, snarled that that wouldn't be possible and that he would die there. Then, our hero, with a scream, advanced towards him, and at the same instant, Dresser leaped among the furniture, preparing his attack. Nito, confused, wondered why the madman was going against his direction. Our hero, however, looked at the floor and realized that that ground wouldn't be very good for him either. Dresser then commented that although it was difficult to find a place to stand on that wooden floor, the boy was in the same situation. But for him, that was different, because there was still a place where he could stand. At the same instant, Dresser violently kicked the bathtub upstairs, which crashed down full of water. Nito was shocked by his movement. Well, Dresser knew that at that time of day, the hot water always ran slowly, so he imagined the bathtub must be full. And thanking only for that day to the person upstairs, he stepped at high speed into the water. That was his full force kick. Then, Nito, determined, stated that he would also use all his strength. At the same instant, Nito's punch collided with Dresser's kick in an explosion of impact. Dresser, gritting his teeth, could hardly believe that the boy had as much power as he did in his Muscle Link battlesuit and wondered, shocked, how many people he had absorbed. However, our hero asked what he meant by absorb, because for him, it wasn't about absorbing, but rather about having been entrusted with his friend's dreams. Dresser, in turn, noticed that Nito's power was increasing, but the wooden floor wouldn't hold. With the floor breaking beneath his feet, our hero affirmed that he would not lose. The wooden floor shattered with the combined force of the two, and Nito, with surprising strength, began to push Dresser. His eyes shone with determination. Meanwhile, Hero, on the floor, asked if he could harden his blood, and with a weak voice, she asked him to stay right there and hit him with all his might. Then, Hero activated her blood order, the red candle, explaining that although it was a capture technique, she had adapted it to create a foothold. Soon she called Dresser stupid, stating that she was still alive and that her foothold was obviously better than water. Nito, with clenched teeth and now with firmer ground, advanced with everything, and so he delivered a devastating hook against Dresser. The impact threw the monster far away, and he, still dizzy, thought he never missed like that, but this time, he had forgotten to check if the succubus was really dead. Suddenly, Dresser remembered his colleague who always praised him, saying that he had become even stronger and hardly left openings during fights. At the same time, another colleague agreed, saying it was true, because those who have someone to protect simply don't fall that easily. Those memories made Dresser remember that he only started taking his work seriously seriously after he had a family. He recalled how happy he was, even if his dream had not come true, because there, beside his wife and his sewing machine, he found joy. Then, in his last moments of life, he stated that one day our protagonist would achieve his dream. Outside, a crowd formed. Looking at the apartment, some residents said there was a succubus inside, while one complained about the broken wall and the broken bathtub, and everyone wondered why security hadn't shown up yet. Suddenly, a group of people in dark suits appeared, and one of them asked everyone to step back, assuring them they would take care of the rest. One of the residents was surprised, and soon the crowd recognized who had arrived. It was the Public Safety Succubus Eradication Department, also known as Martha. Meanwhile, Nito, sitting amidst the rubble, looked at Hiro, who was still lying on the floor. Then he asked what she would do with him after that. However, she remained motionless, giving no answer. But soon she replied that public safety would know, as it would be up to them to decide. She asked him not to run away again, and said that in a world where he was neither of the succubi nor of the humans, he just needed to remember how he had been treated to understand that he would never have a place there. With a sigh, he stated that he would not run away anymore. Then, looking at Dresser's shapeless wife, Nito asked what would happen to that seed, and she replied that there was no salvation for people who had become that. Next, our hero asked about the succubus child that would be inside. At that instant, the sound of a lock being unlatched echoed through the house, and immediately after, the Public Safety Succubus Eradication Department entered, apologizing for the intrusion and announcing their arrival. Then, the leader of the group looked directly into our protagonist's eyes, analyzing the situation, and confirmed Dresser's status, informing that it seemed he had died in battle and that Hiro was gravely wounded. Another group member informed that they had found the seed. With that, they were ordered to eliminate the succubus that was inside. Nito, desperate, shouted for them to wait. And looking at the leader, he argued that if that person couldn't be saved anyway, then there was no reason to kill the child inside. However, he ignored him, and on the phone said that it was unclear if Nito was a succubus or a human. Nito screamed for them to listen, while the extermination group continued approaching Dresser's wife, and coldly he ordered the succubus to die, raising his hand to attack. Suddenly, Dresser, who remained fallen and with half his body shattered, had a burst of energy, and with his hand propelled himself, screaming for his family. Then, with a shout, he lunged forward, roaring that he wouldn't allow it. But the leader, with a swift movement, activated his blood cataclysm. In an instant, a bloody monument rose, sealing the poor guy's body, who screamed in agony. Nito, with tears in his eyes, was wide-mouthed upon seeing that traumatizing situation. Suddenly, swords pierced Dresser's body. The other Martha members approached. While the leader thought it was all an exaggeration, one of his colleagues explained that they just wanted to help him. Soon, Kurogane identified Dresser as a Category B succubus and stated that it had been a miracle that Hiro had won. The leader then ordered his subordinates to take care of the seed. Nito, desperate, asked them to wait, shouting that it was a super important possession of Uncle. Then, one of the agents questioned what was wrong with that boy and why he cared so much about a succubus. The other, looking at Dresser's shapeless wife, commented with pity that the poor thing had been forced to wear tasteless clothes. Then, the first agent, with fury in her eyes, raised her weapon and declared that succubi had no right to live, not even an inch, and plunged the sword into her flesh, leaving our protagonist shocked. At that instant, he remembered Dresser's words, how when one couldn't follow their own dream, one should help someone else realize theirs. Kurogane then, raising his bloody monument, said he would teach Nito something. He explained that in that country, 95% of murders and disappearances were caused by succubi, and that Martha's job was to kill as many of them as possible to save as many people as possible. He affirmed that each of them was a potential killer, and for that reason, they should kill them before they even born. For a moment, Nito remained silent, but soon asked if that was really true, and questioned if the child that would be born from there would really attack people as Uncle had done. Soon he placed his hand on the tip of the sword and asked if that was really the right thing to do. Kurogane then said that, according to Hiro, Nito was originally a seed and had always been mistreated in the hospital. And well, those words brought everything back to mind, remembering that his friends had been killed and that, deep down, he never stopped hating the hospital staff. But he affirmed that that didn't mean the child inside would be like them. Suddenly, Kurogane's phone rang. He answered promptly, and after a brief conversation, he merely said he understood. Then, with a touch on our protagonist's shoulder, he activated his urgent blood technique. Suddenly, several blood threads restrained Nito, and seconds later, he took a punch right in the face. Soon, he fell to the ground, immobilized. On the other side, Hiro asked what that call was about. Kurogane then grabbed Nito by the shirt, announcing that they would take him to Martha's headquarters, and declared that, officially, Nito would be executed. And so, amidst the destruction, Nito's fate seemed sealed. Hiro, touched by the previous dialogue, questioned whether killing was really the right thing to do, and with a sigh, she looked at the sky. Sometime later, Nito woke up in a cold, empty cell. Confused, he wondered what place that was. The leader explained that that was the basement of Martha's headquarters, headquarters, and that it would also be the place of his execution, a place they normally use to interrogate succubi. Suddenly, a paper and a pen were thrown on the cell floor. Kurogan informed that he would allow him to write a will if he had any friends or family he wanted to say goodbye to. Soon, the leader moved away from the cell. He remained silent, just waiting. Until then, someone approached. An imposing woman, the director of Martha's headquarters, said that our protagonist was now officially a Category A succubus, and that for that reason, she herself would take care of the execution. Then, she asked Kurogane to accompany her. Already inside the cell, he reprimanded Nito, saying that he was making a mess with the papers scattered on the floor. He then crouched down and asked if all of those were wills. The director, picking up one of the papers, read the word cat. Silently, Nito took a breath, and suddenly he began to scream, affirming that he wanted to eat chocolate, go to Hawaii, pet a train and a cat, have a normal meal, go to a bar, live in a skyscraper, eat crab, experience sweet and bitter love, go to the beach, eat a beef bowl, get married, eat at Mac, go to the zoo, read manga, live with someone, eat cold summon noodles, take a plane, eat seaweed snacks, watch anime, go to a family restaurant, read more manga, climb mountains, work part-time, camp with friends, fish, sleep in a hammock, eat sushi, and marry a rich person. Kurogane, confused, asked what was wrong with him and if he was reciting everything that was on the floor. Nito then declared that those were his dreams and those of all his friends. He explained that since they talked every day, he remembered each one of them, and that he had learned from Uncle that to realize a dream, one had to risk their own life. With his eyes shining with determination, he affirmed that he would risk his life to realize all the dreams of his friends and his own. Clenching his fists, he declared that he would do anything, and asked if, for that reason, they could cancel that execution thing. Suddenly, the director smiled and simply agreed. That left Kurogane speechless, and, to everyone's surprise, the execution ended up being avoided. Soon after, they found themselves in a cafeteria. Nito, still confused, looked at the enormous pots. He then asked if they weren't about to give him the death penalty. The director, preparing the food, asked him to wait a bit as she was almost done. Our hero wondered what was happening. However, the director, with a gentle smile, apologized and said he must be very nervous thinking he would be killed, and even reprimanded the team leader, Kurogane, stating that his decision to kill him had been too quick. She then confessed that she actually preferred cooking to performing an execution, and that she would make something for him to eat, humorously recalling that a new member once mistook her for the canteen lady. Nito, still a little shy, called her Madam Director, but she soon asked him to call her Amane. He then, calling her by name, asked why she had canceled the execution. At the same instant, she replied that there was no need to rush and that she would tell him later. Soon, she placed the plate in front of Nito, encouraging him to eat before it got cold. And with a smile, she revealed that that was a normal meal, one of his dreams. He looked at the plate and, with a mixture of disbelief and emotion, just sat down. His hand trembled as he held the spoon. He then said that he had waited a long time for that and that he had even practiced how to use a spoon in the hospital. And so, he took the first spoonful to his mouth. Suddenly, tears began to stream down his face, making him sob. He thought about everything that had happened since he had left the hospital. And there, with the city in the background, he finally realized one of his dreams. Then, Amani called him and began to say more about that place. She explained that that neighborhood used to be governed by succubi and that it was there that Martha's headquarters had been built. There were 4 succubus factions: the blood faction, the bone faction, the muscle faction, and the fat faction. Then she revealed that her dream was to destroy those 4 factions. While Nito ate like an animal, she informed him that they had already eliminated the blood succubi. Our hero asked if the blood succubi were like Hiro, and Amane, with a slight smile, explained that Hiro was working with them to protect innocent succubi, affirming that she was a good succubus, and that if they eliminated the 3 remaining factions and made it mandatory to sterilize the good succubi, thus they could live a normal life. Soon, our hero finally began to understand how that place worked. Amani then revealed that that was why they wanted people like Nito and Hiro, and that they needed his help with Martha. Those words made Naito reflect, and ask if, should succubi be able to live a normal life, Uncle and his child would still be alive. He then confessed that he was a little scared, as he feared that a normal meal wouldn't be much different from the hospital food. With that, Amane asked how it had been. Nito placed his hand on his chest and declared that if he could eat something like that again, he would do anything, as he wanted to live a normal life. Kurogan, still waiting outside, heard his boss asking if he wanted seconds, and he, delighted, replied yes. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, one of the agents received the news that the next mission had already been decided, and that it would be very dangerous. The other agent, however, scoffed, asking if they had ever had a mission that wasn't dangerous. Seriously, the third agent affirmed that she was prepared to die. The youngest agent then asked if they remembered their agreement. The last person alive among them would have to confess their feelings to boss Kurogane. And so, the 4 joined hands, stating that there was no way to escape that. Suddenly, Kurogane appeared. questioning what they were doing and asked them to hurry. On the way to the mission, one of them informed that there was no sign of hostile succubi and that they would reach the operation zone in 5 minutes. Inside the vehicle, the Kurogane group prepared for the operation. Nito, bound and blindfolded, asked why he was like that, remembering that he had been so happy moments ago. Hiro, who was also in the vehicle, explained that a Category A succubus needed to be kept under strict control. She then revealed that she was Category C, and for that reason had more freedom and was also in charge of espionage missions. Our hero, surprised, called her upon realizing she was also there. She, however, asked him not to call her so casually. One of the agents, analyzing information on a laptop, revealed that according to the data from Dresser's house, that place was the headquarters of the human seed trafficking network where he worked as a bodyguard. And looking at the map on her phone, the other agent commented that that place should be an art studio. Soon, the other agent commented that, according to Instagram, she seemed to be a sculptor, and the youngest complimented, excitedly, that she was said to be a famous and beautiful rising star in sculpture. Kurogane, however, merely stated that they would know when they got there. A short time later, the vehicle parked in front of a huge warehouse. With a powerful kick, Kurogane broke down the door, and the group entered the place. Inside, they found themselves facing a macabre scene. Countless human figures, some hanging and others lined up. The youngest agent, surprised, exclaimed that that was quite a hobby. The sculptures were disturbing, some with fragmented faces, others in contorted positions. One of them in particular looked like a being with multiple arms and legs, shrunken in on itself. Nito, still bound, watched everything in disbelief, saying how surreal everything was, while Kurogane told him not to touch anything, but he only begged them to remove the restraints from his neck and hands. There were also dolls resembling men in suits, but with holes in their faces. One of the agents was startled to observe one of them more closely, and soon called for Boss Kurogane. Suddenly, the mouth of one of those figures opened, and the agent exclaimed that those were real humans. Soon, the leader shouted that he had found the human trafficking victims, and the agents, shocked, understood that the succubi disguised the seeds by pretending to be mere works of art. Meanwhile, our hero tried to free himself from his handcuffs, and then, seated on a throne of flesh, an imposing figure appeared. She was the sculptor, and realizing the invasion, merely commented that Martha had entered, while one of her victims, or rather her chair, begged to be killed. The sculptor's henchmen advanced rapidly. Meanwhile, a man in a suit ordered them to capture our protagonist and kill the rest. Kurogane, noticing the movement, said that that was exactly as Director Amane had predicted, and shouted for them to get into battle formation because they wanted something from Nito. At the same instant, Kurogane shouted for the director, questioning why she didn't execute him at once. But with a smile, she asked if he played video games. Kurogane, confused, replied not much, and that, once again, he didn't understand what she was trying to say. Amane then explained that when one obtains a rare item in a game, there are a certain number of people who don't use it because they think it's a waste. Mentioning items like elixirs, Yggdrasil leaves, and master balls, she said that, if used, they could prevent a lot of damage to teammates, but affirmed that many didn't use them until the end of the game. Then, she finally revealed that Nito would be bait to attract enemies and make them follow him. She explained that they were tracking him with a transmitter on his neck and that, if he ran away, Martha would kill him, as his death sentence had not changed at all. Meanwhile, our hero begged someone to release him. Then, Amane affirmed that just like Nito, she would do anything to keep the people she cared about alive, even if it was something small. Everything began in a quiet room, and there, sunken into a beanbag chair in the corner of the room, was our hero. As he calmly leafed through the pages of a book, he murmured to himself that that place, silent and cozy, was the literature club. And while the club, in truth, didn't develop any real
Are there any bats?
No.
Are there any snakes?
Nope.
You sure?
After the Snow White thing, I'm gonna be honest, I will be shocked if she gets cast in almost anything. Nobody will want to cast her, and here's the real reason why I think nobody's gonna want to cast Rachel Ziegler. It actually has nothing to do with any of her comments besides that, and it has to do with her making the Free Palestine post on her promotion for the film. That is the reason why I think that no other studio will ever work with her again. And it's not because, like, oh, it's Jews. No, it's not about that at all. It's because she's taking a political issue and she is putting it on the media that she's putting out there. Yeah, exactly. Oh, politics by? Exactly, right? Yeah, people are immediately out of that. It's unprofessional. It's PR nightmare. It's just alienating.
Snow White was supposed to be her career's biggest movie, but was so brutally criticized, it instead became the one that destroyed her life.
Pretty much I can't post a picture of myself on Twitter without a bunch of people telling me how ugly I am.
Welcome to my fucking life. Then don't. Like, damn.
That's hard. Simultaneously wishing people would stop sending me death threats.
Oh, jeez.
Or perhaps it was all part of the plan, because decades ago, Walt Disney himself said Snow White should never be remade, but they went ahead.
Some things aren't meant to be remade, they're meant to be remastered. So somehow he predicted this was going to happen, or they're meant to be remembered. How the fuck did he know that? Damn.
But they went ahead anyway, and by the time the trailer dropped, people hated it already.
Yeah.
If I saw this movie on a plane, I would still walk out. Was it that hard to find someone who actually looks like Snow White?
Yeah.
This comment made a good point. I just find it funny that her name is Snow White and she's not white. It just defeats the purpose. Petitions to cancel the remake started immediately.
Yeah, people went
quickly
absolutely
snowballing
crazy
into
on this.
over 2.2
2.3 million dislikes. Imagine having that much of a dedicated hater base. That's insane.
million dislikes,
Jesus.
leading people to wonder why Disney wasn't canceling the movie or making some changes. Well, they did make changes. For starters, they swapped out real dwarf actors for CGI, which looked hideous. Instead of the beloved original characters, we got creepy, soulless abominations that looked like they crawled out of a failed video game. And strangely, in the
Well, yeah,
live
because doing the opposite was considered like some form of ableism. That's the reason why. It was so stupid.
action remake, even the trees were CGI, which was an atrocious waste of money as well. To make matters worse,
So they couldn't, well, they couldn't find any trees, guys. You gotta understand. I mean, filming is hard.
removed these iconic tracks from the original, one of which being Someday My Prince Will Come, because
What a
apparently
surprise.
Snow White dreaming of love makes her too dependent, which only makes sense considering there's no prince either, just a bandit named Jonathan.
So
Because
there's no Prince Charming and just a bandit. Wow, this really is for women nowadays, isn't it? Jesus. That's bad.
the writers intentionally didn't want a prince saving Snow White.
By making him a thief and a lowlife, rather than an authoritative figure of any kind. It's as if the idea of a balanced relationship is offensive to them.
Of
As
course it is, because a lot of these women, you know what they have? Personal unresolved trauma. And so they have some issue that they've had with some man in their life, and they're looking for media to reinforce the way that they feel. That's it. Yep, a chip on their shoulder. Absolutely.
It felt more like a political statement than a kid's movie. And in case it isn't obvious, it was a garbage cash grab. The ending scenes felt like a Diddy party, and no surprise, people absolutely hated it. But there was
Snow
one thing
White is worse than AIDS.
they hated even more: Snow White herself. Why? Well, arrogance. That's why. Back in 2020, Rachel Zegler called Jeremy Renner a racist, sexist, transphobic garbage monster based on
What the fuck is this bitch talking about? Oh my god. Racist, sexist, transphobic garbage monster. Damn.
irrelevant allegations that were proven to be false. And when they use it,
Oh, okay, there we go. So let's see here. Let me read it. Jeremy Renner has faced serious allegations from his ex-wife, including claims of threats and reckless behavior. What does that have to do with being transphobic? No criminal charges have been filed against him, and the allegations have not been definitively proven. Rayner has consistently denied the allegations, and legal proceedings so far have not resulted in any findings supporting any claims. So, okay. So he didn't do it, probably. All right. Yep. Dog, she just projecting?
be false. And when the
Jesus.
user told her to learn the facts before running her mouth, she arrogantly replied, "Better catch my mouth, cause she running."
Better catch my mouth cause she running by. It is crazy to me that anybody that is not in 4th grade or below is saying this. This is like, this is some shit that this is like talk to the hand. It's on that level, guys. Oh my God. Not even remotely going to address the story that came out today, but he has made racist, sexist, and transphobic comment and totally disrespected the deaf community. What the fuck are you talking about?
I'm Sharon, and this is our H-E-B limited edition pure cane sugar soda. Summer in Texas.
She never should have been cast, but this will be her last movie, judging by her comments.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story.
Yeah.
With a guy who literally stalks her. Weird.
After calling the prince a stalker, she said this.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White.
Dude, this is why. Do you know who's really happy that Google just brought out that VEO 3? The guys that are like working production studios at Hollywood. They are thinking, thank fucking God. We've only got to deal with this shit for maybe 10 more years and then it's over. And we're never going to have to think about this shit ever again.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about...
Why is that like, that's what's so weird. Why is that bad? It's bad to hope to have a husband and like to fall in love. Why is this bad? Well, I think that you will find out if you were her and you knew her dating life as well as she did. I think that these comments would make perfect sense. I do. I think that it would immediately, everything would be like, oh, of course she thinks that. Absolutely.
Becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Now, in the beginning, her statements weren't that outrageous, although
Yeah.
there was one massive issue. She couldn't keep her mouth shut.
Yep.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like,
Isn't that I mean, I don't understand how do you have some, like, I mean, this isn't even a live interview. Like, how do you greenlight this and let it go live? I didn't like the original show. Okay, so why are you redoing it? What the hell's wrong with you?
I'm being so serious. I watched it once, never revisited Snow White again.
Zegler gives I Deserve This role more than anyone, and the fact that she has zero good to say about the original is disgusting narcissist, which wasn't wrong.
Is it how many times in a row are we going to get like shows, you know, like we were talking about Dredd before? You know, Carl Urban didn't want to show his face in Judge Dredd, even though he's this really well-known actor, because that's not what Judge Dredd would have done. And Henry Cavill playing Geralt as well. Like, it's just, again, how many times has somebody who hated the movie or hated the original, like, been able to make something that was good? I feel like that doesn't really happen very often, you know?
For example, she seemed oddly excited saying her co-star's scenes could get cut.
I have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because, like, we cast a guy in the movie. Right. Andrew Burnap, great dude. Yeah. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
Which is funny, considering...
What a bitch, bro. What a bitch. Jeez, man. Why would you say that? Because she's a bitch. That's why. What do you mean? Oh, why does this happen? Why would it be?
She acts like she's making the movie herself, but ironically, she became the main reason people didn't want to watch it, and she eventually explained why. After Donald Trump won the election, Rachel posted this story, basically calling him full of hate.
That was it, bro. Like, Donald won. He put... Donald killed her career. That was it.
But at the end, she said...
It's actually how Donald, like, the Donald reckoning of Karens... The reverberations of this will be felt for 15 years. And then I remember J.D. Vance saying, frankly, Margaret, I don't care. That was, yeah, bro, like that shit was, I was so glad to finally fucking hear that shit. Yeah. Thank God.
Trump supporters, voters, and Trump himself never know peace.
This is a good one.
Being completely opposite to the message she always preached. Clearly, she was a hypocrite as well.
Well, no, every single person who preaches acceptance and love will be the first person to, you know, pillory you and make up lies about you the moment that you say something that they disagree with. This is what they always do. They're like, well, we are so accepting and so supportive of everybody that anyone who disagrees with us, it's okay for us to basically kill them. Naturally.
Disney made her apologize and hired a social media guru to review every post until the movie's release.
Jesus. Think about how much money that is. Think about how much time that is. Millions of dollars invested on this bullshit.
Style or substance? Or here's another choice. Don't stop until you have everything in the GMC Sierra Denali Ultimate. We are professional grade.
So, what do you think? Oh,